Hello, I'm Dianne and welcome to my channel, Dianne's Sewing Room. So today in this video I'm going to share with you my top 10 tips for sustainable sewing. Now we all love to go and buy those new pieces of fabric and notions and patterns, but sometimes it's much better to use what we already have or make sure that we're making the most of what we have already. So my first tip today, number one tip, is to make sure that you get your notions for free whenever possible. Now, most of the time you're going to have garments that you never wear. There may be things that you're about to throw out because they're not good enough to take to the charity shop. Always make sure that you take out all zips, fasteners and buttons before you do this, because old clothes are a fantastic source of all these things. Now, I have a tin. I think I may have shown this before in a previous video, but I'm going to show it again. Even the tin is thrifted because this is from a charity shop too. Gorgeous little tin for keeping in my zips that I've taken out of other projects. So my little tin here is overflowing with zips. Now this may seem like a bit of a pain at times because you're thinking, oh, I don't want to be unpicking things. You don't have to do that immediately. You're just saving it for future use. So what you can do is just cut around it for now. So with this one, as you can see, this was an old bag that was given to me. The bag was pretty much damaged, but a friend of mine knew that I'd be making bags and I used all kinds of zips. So she gave me the bag for the bits that I could salvage. So I will probably use these D-rings at some point, and I will probably use this zip in another pocket or something. So what I've done is just cut it out around it, and I took away bits of the fabric as well that I might use for applique or other little details on bags. So I've saved all the bits that I wanted and then got rid of the rest. So I just cut around it like this and I pop it in my tin. And then when I do want to use it, I will then carefully, with my seam ripper, unpick it properly. So it doesn't need to take you a lot of time at the time, but you have got these things saved. So here again is another one from a lining. I've just cut around it in a rectangle, and then when I want to use it, when that time comes, I'll unpick it properly at that time. So I've got a whole tin full of zips here that haven't cost me anything extra, and they're all ready for future projects. So often you will see me making something that requires a concealed zip or something, and I will say, I'm not using a concealed zip today because what I have is this one, and it may be one from my stash right here. So that's one thing that you can do. Also buttons. So I've got lots of little jars, so you can save your jars from your groceries that you've washed out. This particular one was a gift, so it's got a pretty little lid on it. But I've got buttons and D-rings and things in that one, and I've got a selection of jars on the back there that I've got other buttons in. So I always save all of those too. As I said, D-rings and fasteners like that I might use on bag making. Store those in little boxes. You're pretty much ready to go if you do this, and you won't have to be running out to dash out to get things for a project because you will already have them. And then fabrics. So whenever you've got large bits of fabric or even small pieces of fabric, if you just keep stuffing them in drawers and boxes and you're not very well organised, chances are you won't use them again. So what I've started to do recently is any smaller amounts that I know are not big enough for bigger projects but are too pretty to throw away, because if we buy nice fabrics we don't want to waste any of it, I've made myself a template and I've started cutting them into little squares. So I've also colour coded some of mine, so little squares to use in future. So these are sort of greys and blacks from things that I've already made, and they're all the same size. And then here I've got different blues and pinks and navies, and they will be used on smaller projects in future. Which brings me on to tip number 2. Save all your small pieces of fabric for small projects. So this could be adding applique to bags, purses or children's wear, making accent pockets on an item that you want to upcycle. So you may use small piece of fabric, such as this one, to make a little pocket or to add a bit of a detail. You could also use these for fun patches. So if you put something a little bit stronger behind them, you could use them for patching jeans and making it more of a feature. So visible mending with some of your brighter fabrics just peeking through that hole. So that's another way that you could use it. Making jewellery and brooches and hair accessories. All these small pieces of fabric will come in useful for any of those kind of projects. So even the smallest amount can be saved. Now I have another video which I will link below on making bias binding. So you don't need any specialist equipment for the way that I show you in that video, and all you do need are some long strips of fabric. So when you've cut out your sewing projects, so when you've got odd bits of fabric left, just small strips going through the middle when you've cut out a dressmaking project, you can save all those pieces and you can stitch them together and make bias binding, and then roll those up, put them in another container, and you've got your bias binding ready for another project. There are so many things that you can do with all these leftover little bits, so please don't throw them out. While we're saving fabric, ribs and cuffs are another thing that you should save. So your children may have old hoodies that they don't wear anymore, or you or your partner may have a hoodie that you don't wear anymore. Now the fabric on the hoodie might not be any good, but you'll take out that zip, of course. If you cut off the cuffs and the rib bottom, these come in handy also. Now they may not be big enough for something you're going to make for yourself, but maybe they're big enough for children's wear, or these pieces may be big enough, the long pieces from the bottom, to use for cuffs. So this is something I've done a few times, and this one, as you can see, I've just cut it away like I said before. I've not unpicked it carefully because I'm just saving it, and then I'll roll that up and I will keep that for a future project. Now I've got one here to show you. Now the outer fabric is new fabric, some fabric that I bought specifically for a garment, and then I had a small amount of rib from another project left which I managed to use for the collar here, and the cuffs were a saved rib. So here I used my saved fabric, and also inside. So in this particular jacket, I'm going to hold this up, the inside is one of my children's old hoodies. So it's been cut up and then rejoined. As you can see, in places I've had to join pieces together to make it big enough. And it's still got the writing on. I quite like that effect, so I've left that in. But the sleeves are some green satin lining that I had left from another project, and also it's nice for the sleeves to be silky because your arms just slide in. So the lining on that one is a mixture of pieces. The ribs are salvaged and saved, and the outer fabric is new fabric, and I love that. That's one of my favourite makes from last year. So that's just showing how you can combine old and new. You do need to make sure you always wash your new fabric, especially when you're using it with old fabric, because it can shrink away from it. So that's something that you do need to remember. So save those ribs. So tip number 4 is to redo old projects. So any sewing project that you've done before and you may not be wearing it, have a rethink. Is there something else you could make it into? If it's a dress that you've made that's not quite right, maybe you could remove the skirt and the bodice and make it into a skirt and maybe a crop top. Maybe you could reuse the fabric for something else. Have a good look through and think how you can redo it. Do the buttons need changing? Is it a bad fit? Can it be sized down for children's wear, or maybe just some other project like bag making or accessories or gifts? Don't just discard it because you don't love it. Is there something else that you can do with it? So have a good think. Then tip number 5 is to go to charity shops. As I've mentioned in my other videos, they are a great source of cheap, inexpensive fabric. If you can get things that fit you that just need tweaking, then that's great. But if you go for larger sizes, you have so many more options. So you have much more fabric if you go for sizes a few sizes bigger than yourself. There's room to play around and recut a whole new pattern. Now, This doesn't just have to be clothes, it could be duvet covers, curtains. You can use these for not only clothes but home projects. You could make a toile to practice on. You could make linings for things. Now, going back to using them for clothes, I got this top out of one of my charity shop makes, and you may have seen me in this if you watch my other videos. Now, maxi dresses are brilliant because if you buy a maxi dress in a much bigger size, you've got loads of fabric there. And even if you're making something like a small top, it doesn't need even to be in a bigger size. If you've got a full skirt and you undo that gathering, if it's an ankle length skirt, you have so much fabric to play with. So this was a maxi dress and it was about 3 to 4 sizes bigger than what I take. It wasn't gathered, it was just straight down to the floor, but because it was a bigger size, I had enough fabric to make this top. Now, the pattern was from a Birder magazine, and the dress had a really deep border pattern at the bottom. So this frill here was about maybe a foot deep border around the bottom of the maxi dress. I've cut that off all the way around, and it has made the frill front and back on this Birder pattern that had a frill on. The tie here was the belt that tied at the back of the maxi dress, so I've repurposed that, and that is part of the Birder pattern design. So I did need to make a tie, but all I had to do here was to use the belt for the tie, and then I recut out of the skirt of the maxi dress the pieces for the Birder top, the armhole, and then again for the bindings I used some of that lovely border print all the way around to bind my armholes. And I love this top, and the maxi dress was on the pound rail, so it was £1, and I got a top that I wanted to make. I didn't have to splash out a lot on fabric, and I even got some really nice details from that. So do check out those charity shops and really have a think what you can do with some of those clothes. You might not like them when you first see them, but if you have a good think, you may make something fabulous. So I'll pop that down. My next tip is wear what you make. So it's no good buying all these fancy fabrics and prints in all these vibrant colours if you're not going to wear them and they're just not for you. So have a look through your wardrobe, have a look and think where the gaps are, and plan before you make things. So if you think you have got lots of skirts but you haven't got the tops to go with them, make yourself a note. What colour fabric will go with a number of these items? Could you make yourself one top that will make some of those items more wearable? The same goes for tops. Do you need maybe just a pair of jeans or trousers, or maybe a plain skirt that will make your wardrobe work better for you? So have a little plan, have a little think, go and have a dig around in there, see what's not getting worn and think about why before you make your next homemade project. So tip number 7 is to shop what you have already. So that's about using up your existing supplies before dashing out and buying new. So if you have a new project that you want to make, but you have some fabric lying around and you think it's not quite enough, can you have another think about it? What could you do? Could you maybe do a contrasting colour on the facings and the underside of collars? Could you maybe do features like pockets and bands in a different colour from some other fabric that you may already have? Or maybe even different coloured sleeves entirely. Maybe just have a look at things differently. Maybe you could colour block that garment. So maybe have a diagonal design going across the front, or maybe just bands, stripes. There are lots of ways that you can really change up a pattern and make it into a design feature if you use up some of the fabrics that you already have. And this brings me on to number 8, which is going back to notions. If your new pattern requires buttons, have you got a garment lying around like an old shirt that already has some buttons on it? Could you use those? Do the buttons have to be the same colour? Could you use contrasting buttons? Have a little look round, see what you have already. Now tip number 9 is to repair your makes. So you've spent time on these items that you've lovingly created, but they maybe have got a little rip or tear or a pop seam or maybe a broken zip. Put them in a little pile or a box and set them aside, and then make it your mission once a week or once a month to go through this little box of projects and repair those homemade items. It's no good spending time on them originally if you're just going to discard them at the slightest little mishap. So go through your clothes. Are there any that need repairing? Make a little mending pile and make it your goal to repair these items. This is also good for items that don't fit properly or incorrectly. So if each time you put them on you find a little snag with them, it's not quite right at the bust, you feel like they're a bit baggy on the waist, you want to add some darts, make a little note, pop it on that pile and get round to it. This will make sure that everything gets worn and is not just left discarded. Coming back to adding buttons and details, if you don't love it, is there something you can do to make it more wearable? Could you change the buttons? Could you add some design features? And then finally, number 10 is back to planning. Plan your projects carefully. It's no good making something that is the latest fashion if that latest fashion doesn't suit you. Making our own clothes is brilliant because we can make things that we love and that are suitable for our bodies and for our lifestyles. So I don't think it's great to always follow the latest fashion trends because those fashion trends don't suit everybody. So plan your makes carefully, look at what you need and just enjoy your sewing. So that was my top 10 tips for sustainable sewing today. If you've thought of any more that I might have missed out, please let me know in the comments. I would like to give a little shout out to Tracy, who watched and commented on one of my previous videos just as I was making notes for this one. I've taken your ideas on board, Tracy, and I will be doing some future videos based on your ideas, so thank you for that. And she did also want to see more refashions and remakes. So I hope you're watching today and you've seen a couple of the ideas that I've shown for using up bits of your discarded fabric or charity shop finds. So more of those to come. If there's anything else you'd like to see, again, add it in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I will be back soon with more ideas for you. So bye for now.